Hi, everybody. Well, you know, I always have mixed feelings when I come to this organization. On the one hand, as I've said before, it is thrilling. It is absolutely thrilling to see so many people turn out on a cold Tuesday night, or tonight a warm Tuesday night, to hear a discussion about foreign affairs, because, God, the very fact that you're here kind of disproves this totally common stereotype about our country around the world, that we don't care about the rest of the world. You know, they think we're insular, you know, we don't know anything, and they're so wrong. And to come out here to the foothills of Colorado and see this big group to hear a talk on foreign affairs, it's kind of thrilling for me. On the other hand, I gotta say, I really feel jealous because I'm a member of the Denver World Affairs Council. We never get a crowd this big. I think you have more members than we do. We have the whole Front Range to draw on, and somehow we can't do this. So maybe if you don't send in your membership form, as Joe asked you to, we'll pass you, and then I'll feel better. It's also very pleasant to come because many people here have told me that you've read some of my books and seen some of my documentary films, and you know, an author, all you can say about that is thank you. It's a lot of work to write a book. Many people in this room know that, and all you can ask as an author is that people take the time and take some of their busy time and read your book and think about the ideas there. Many people in this room I've spoken about, you know, talked to them about the ideas in my book. That's really all an author can ask for, and you don't have to agree with me. That's not part of the rule. You can read the book and say, Reid is all wet. You can read one chapter and say, this is baloney. That's fine, but to read the book, think about it, pay some attention to what I'm trying to tell you. As I say, that's about all an author can ask for, and I thank you. Well, it's not all. It's also good if you buy my books. We like this. And those of you who have sat through the ordeal of hearing a speech by me before in this very room will know that I tend to comment on the weather, particularly this time of year. Now, of course, today is a totally beautiful spring-like day. Unusual for November, and coming up here, I'm sure many of you saw that spectacular Colorado sunset over the mountains, quite wonderful. But I see on the weather that, you know, Thursday or Friday it's going to get cold again, it's going to start snowing again, and that cold, crisp air and that snow reminds us that December is coming, and of course December means winter, and of course winter means Christmas. And speaking of Christmas, my publisher has asked me to point out that my books make great Christmas giving. I still got 2 kids in college. I have to be shameless about it. Yeah, I'm totally shameless. So, today I'm going to talk about my new book, my next book, which is coming out next. Well, who knows? I keep not finishing it, but now I'm finishing it. It's finished. I think it's going to come out next June or so. And this is the topic of a PBS documentary we had on last April, which they're going to show again in April, March or April this year. And the topic there is how other rich countries like us, handle their healthcare systems. Why is it that the other industrialized, high-tech, free market democracies, countries like us, manage to cover everybody in their healthcare system with very high quality, better health results than we have, and still spend half as much as we do on healthcare? How do they do this? And can't we learn something from them? And that's the basic thesis of this new book. And so to do it, what I've done is I just went around the world. I went to the doctor in 9 countries, and I just see how long it takes to see the doc, what the facilities are like, what the treatment's like, who pays, how much it costs, things like that, and how it compares. How do they do it? How do those countries, which are just like us, I'm not talking about Cuba or Afghanistan or Algeria, I'm talking about Britain, Germany, France, Japan. free market democracies like us cover everybody and spend a heck of a lot less money than we do, even though we leave tens of millions uncovered. How do they do it? That's the idea. And we made a film about this, and my book is about this, and my basic argument is, if we do decide to fix our rotten, sick healthcare system, there's a lot of ideas out there, a lot of models from countries just like us. There's a lot we can learn. And we could fix our healthcare system if we were willing to look overseas and take some ideas. And of course, that's a fairly big if, because that raises this threshold question: are Americans willing to learn from other countries? And this is the topic that the political scientists call American exceptionalism. You know, that is the idea: we're different, we're better, we're richer, we're stronger. We don't have to learn how to run a doctor's office from some French guy, even though the French system is vastly better than ours. That's the idea. So the question is, why is this idiot making films and writing a book when Americans won't even listen? But I argue, yes, we are willing to look at other countries. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, many of the most cherished elements of American life are ideas that we borrowed from other countries. I came up here on the interstate highway system. The interstate highway system, as you probably know, Dwight D. Eisenhower copied from the Germans. It was the German Autobahn. And it's been a fundamental part of American life. Look at all the things the interstate highway system gave us. The hour-long commute to work, the hotel, et cetera, quick access to Colorado ski areas. And nobody seems to care that we borrowed this idea from the Nazis. It was a good idea, and Eisenhower took it and built the interstate highway system here based on the German Autobahn. Public broadcasting, something I like. I bet the people in this room watch public broadcasting. That's an idea we borrowed from the Brits. Where are my high school kids? Where's the high school kids? As you probably know, text messaging is an idea we learned from Finland, and that's caught on pretty big in America. We use text messaging. Go down the list: yoga, sushi, pizza. We got all that overseas, and when I don't know if you watch TV, but on TV, The Office and American Idol are both shows that we stole from Britain. So, hey, if we're willing to copy American Idol, can't we learn something about healthcare? So here's what I'm going to do. Today, I'm going to just kind of review very quickly some of the things we found and some of the things, surprisingly, we didn't find when we went around the world looking at these different healthcare systems and see what standards we can draw and what conventional wisdom in America might be wrong. I think a lot of it is wrong. And then what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to categorize these different systems. They're not all alike. I'm going to try to categorize them and give you a set of models and see which ones might work for America to copy. And we'll try to do that very quickly so you can ask questions. I've been to this group before, and I know your questions are much more interesting than my speech, so we'll try to race through this. First of all, I don't think I have to go through this in great detail for this crowd, but we need to fix our healthcare system because of fundamental flaws with our healthcare system. It really is not working. According to the National Academy of Sciences, about 20,000 Americans die every year from treatable diseases because they can't afford to see a doctor. In the richest country in the world, we're letting our neighbors die because they can't pay a doctor bill. No other rich country lets that happen. We're now making a second PBS movie that's going to be on. What they're going to do next spring, they're going to show this round the world movie that we made, and then the next week I'm going around America looking at healthcare, and we just did the worst part of the story. A 31-year-old graduate of the University of Texas, living in Tennessee, got lupus. This is a treatable disease. It's a chronic disease. Most people live to be 70. Lost her job, lost her health insurance, couldn't pay the doctor, and died at age 31. And in any other country in the world, that woman would have lived to be 75. But we let her die in America. How can we do that? And then if you don't die, if you don't face physical ruin, you can face financial ruin if you get sick in America. The Harvard School of Public Health says that about 700,000 Americans every year go bankrupt because of medical bills. And you know, I'm a journalist, I read studies, so I read this study and it's a little hokey. I mean, how they got to that number is a little, there's a big leap there, but clearly there's a large number. There are hundreds of thousands of our fellow citizens who go bankrupt every year because of medical bills. I was just recently giving a talk in Boston, and I said, you know, there's this study from Harvard that says 700,000 people go bankrupt every year, and because of medical bills, and I think it's kind of hokey. I think it's a big number, but I don't think that it's that number. And a woman raises her hand and says, "I'm Dr. Steffi Woolhandler of the Harvard School of Public Health, and I wrote that study." Yeah. On second, the striking thing about that terrible number is it doesn't happen in any other rich country. If those of you who saw my film saw, in every country, I said to the health minister, how many people in your country go bankrupt every year because of medical bills? You know, and they kind of look at you, you know, like you came from Mars or something. What do you mean? Zero. You know how many people go bankrupt because of medical bills? In Canada, 0. In Britain, 0. France, 0. Germany, 0. Switzerland, 0. Japan, 0. The United States, 400,000 or 500,000. Why do we let that happen? Well, my argument is we don't have to let that happen if we're willing to take some lessons from other countries. So here's what we learned going around the world and what we didn't see. First of all, and this is really important for Americans to understand, and this is absolutely right, I'm sure this is right, it's not all socialized medicine out there. You know this notion, if you listen to the Republican presidential debates last spring, well, we got a problem with healthcare, but the last thing we need is European-style socialized medicine. We can't have that, was what they always said. And frankly, this notion that it's all socialized medicine, it permeates American politics. Michael Moore, you know, the lefty, in his lefty movie Sicko, first talks about how bad American medicine is, then he goes overseas and everything's hunky-dory. He says it's all socialized medicine, it's great, what's wrong with socialism anyway? Like that. No, that's vastly too simplistic. It's not all socialized medicine. Now, there's some truth in that argument. There are some countries where the government provides the care, owns the hospitals, employs the doctors, and pays for the care. Britain's classic example, Britain's National Health Service. Well, all right, I'll take that as socialized medicine. If the government is the provider and the payer, would you say that's socialized medicine? Yeah, I would. But then there are other countries, Canada is the classic example, where the providers of healthcare are private. The docs and hospitals are not government. And the payment is through a government healthcare scheme, you know, a government insurance scheme. So that's private provider, public payer, what do you call that? Semi-socialized medicine? Half socialized? I don't know. But then there are many countries, many rich industrialized countries, Germany, France, Netherlands, Switzerland, Japan, etc., that provide total coverage for everybody, high quality, lower costs than we have, with private docs, private hospitals, and private insurance plans. It's not socialized. In fact, I argue in my book, I mentioned my new book, right? I argue in my new book that many countries in Europe are less socialized than America. In Germany, for example, well, in America, when you turn 65, just about everybody switches to a government insurance plan called Medicare. In Germany, they stay with their private insurer for life, birth to death. They never go to government. So I'd say they're less socialized. So it's all socialized medicine. Only partly true, and not even not much of a part. Next, here's something we all know about foreign healthcare, right? They ration care. They save money, they cut costs by limiting choices and making people wait forever in long waiting lines. We've all heard that one, right? Here again, there is a germ of truth to this. Every country, including the United States of America, rations care. Nobody can pay for everything. And so they all make choices about what the healthcare system will cover, will pay for. And they're all different choices. It's quite striking. In my book, I talk about which countries' healthcare systems pay for Viagra. kind of an interesting list. I mean, the Britain, you know, with this National Health Service, which I consider quite stingy on most points, they cover Viagra. And I think the reason is a British scientist invented Viagra, and they're proud of this guy, so they're going to pay for his pill. But you go 25 miles away across the channel, and France's system won't pay for Viagra. And I went into Paris and talked to the health minister, and she said, yeah, that's what she said. She said, the Frenchmen, they do not need Viagra. When our family lived in Japan, every year on my birthday, I got this letter. It's a totally Japanese letter. Dear Honorable Rito-san, please excuse our humble encroachment on your busy, important life, but we respectfully wish to congratulate you on the august occasion of your birthday, which has just occurred. And may we respectfully suggest that you take time from your incredibly busy schedule to go have an annual physical exam. We'll pay for it. It's free at any clinic in Tokyo. And I did it every year, and it was a hell of a good physical. I mean, you know, they made you drink the barium, they did all that stuff, and it was free. And I'm thinking to myself, so this is what happens in a country that has universal health care. They really care about preventive medicine and keeping everybody healthy. That was my conclusion. Then we moved to Britain. As I told you, Britain, everybody's covered in a single system and run by the government, and they never gave me a physical. And I said to my GP, gee, I should get an annual physical. And he said, not in our country, mate. You know, you want a physical, go down the street to the private clinic and pay him 700 quid. You know, it was about $1,000 at the time. No, they didn't pay for it because they didn't think it was cost effective. And get this, in Britain, they wouldn't even give me the PSA test. This is a blood test for prostate cancer, and every man my age gets this test. It's normal. And I said to my GP in Britain, God, in America, they automatically give me this test every year. What are you talking about? And he said, well, we've decided that test isn't cost effective. Yeah, and I'm thinking, hey, if it finds cancer in me, it's pretty damn cost effective, you know? But he's thinking of a whole society, and they're making choices like all of them do. That's absolutely true. But let me just say that many countries in the world offer much more choice than any American has when it comes to healthcare. Let's talk about insurance plans or financing. In Germany, there are 240 private health insurance companies. Anybody in Germany can buy any one of them. If you don't like your plan, you can drop it on 1 month's notice, sign up with another one, and they can't raise your premium. Now I ask you, is there any American in this room who can choose among 240 insurance plans and switch every month? No. Yeah, with no American has that kind of choice. Now, other countries like Germany and Japan, for example, France and Japan, they don't give you that choice of insurer. Your insurer is assigned to you, depending on where you work. That's like most Americans, or where you live or something. But they have a much broader choice of provider. You can go anywhere. You know, this in-network business or this preferred provider that American insurance plans have, or pre-authorization, you got to ask your insurer first. Go to the gatekeeper before you can see the specialist. There's none of that in Japan. In Japan, in-network means any doctor or any hospital in the entire country. You go and insurance has to pay, and you don't have to go anywhere to some GP to go in to get a recommendation. You just show up. In France, 61 million people, they have 7 private insurance plans. In France, the rule is you can go to any doctor, any hospital, any lab in any of the 27 EU countries, and insurance has to pay the bill within 2 weeks. So that's much more choice than Americans have. So they all limit choice to save money? No. As a matter of fact, many of them provide more choice than we do. Now, let's get on to those notorious waiting lists, which we hear about all the time from American politicians. And here again, there's some truth to this. Some countries have decided to control costs by limiting the number of surgeons, limiting the number of operating rooms, et cetera. So you have to wait a long time to get the procedure. Britain and Canada are the two really notorious examples, although the Labour government in Britain has really poured tons of money into the NHS, and the waiting lists are much shorter than they used to be, although they're still longer than somebody in America would wait for who has insurance. In Canada, in Canada's a pretty good healthcare system. I mean, anybody who's sick can go see the doctor for free, anybody. But they have sharply limited the number of specialists and emergency and treatment surgeries to save money. And so I went to this GP in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, a very good doctor, really good guy. And I said to him, "Doc, look, I got this sore shoulder. I can barely raise my shoulder. It hurts. I need help." And he said, yeah, I see that problem. Yeah, I think I need to write you a referral to an orthopedic specialist. Fine. How long will it take? He said, well, it'll be 10 or 12 months. I said, no, you see, my shoulder hurts. I don't want to wait 12 months to have it treated. And the doctor said, oh, I didn't say treated. It'll take you 10 months to see him, and then 6 or 8 months more after that to get it treated. That's absolutely true. That's, at least an American who has insurance would never have to wait that long. But many countries also do better than America on this score too. In Germany, the Netherlands, France, and Japan, standard measures like the waiting time to see a specialist, the waiting time for elective surgery, or the waiting time to get your prescription after it's prescribed to you are shorter than in the US. That is to say, many of these countries have less waiting time than America does. So they all keep you waiting and limit choice? No, they don't all. That's not necessarily part of foreign healthcare. Next, we all know this, that those foreign healthcare systems, they're bloated bureaucracies. A lot of them are run by government. They're inefficient. They're costly, full of paperwork. They're government bureaucracies. It's like, this line, the post office can't deliver my letter on time, he's going to cure my cancer, like that kind of line, Yeah, it's not true. As a matter of fact, the least efficient and most expensive healthcare system in the whole developed world is the American private insurance companies. The American private insurance system runs administrative costs that run with different measures. They say about 15%, most of the economists say 20 to 25%. But somewhere in the range of 15 to 25% of every dollar you pay in premiums goes to paperwork and goes to profit and marketing. It doesn't go to curing your ailment. Let's compare that to these inefficient bureaucracies overseas. Canada, completely government-run health insurance system, administrative costs 5.5%. 1/4 of our private insurance system. France, you think of France as these high-tech administrative wizards. I don't. 4% administrative costs in France. Japan is running about 3.5%, and Taiwan is the world champion in this area. Taiwan has administrative costs of 1.7%. They adopted a Canadian system, so it's private providers and public government-run insurance. 1.7%. And about 3 years ago, the healthcare administrative burden in Taiwan went up to 2%. And the opposition party trashed the government for wasting money. If only we had that problem. We're the least efficient, and those other countries do a better job of being efficient. In a minute, I'm going to explain why that's true. Another interesting thing we learned is that kind of surprised me is health insurance companies don't have to be cruel. Now, as you know, everybody in America despises, or most people really don't like their health insurance company. They're always denying claims. In my case, every time I file a claim for my college daughter, they say, Aaron Reid, we've never heard of an Aaron Reid. Who is this person? Is she related to you? Yeah, I've been filing claims for 20 years on this kid. No, no. Like that. They always do that. When we lived in Japan, my wife was going to a specialist, and we were billing the Washington Post insurance plan for this. It was Prudential, and they never paid. I mean, a year, 2 years went by, and they never paid a claim. And finally, I called Newark and talked to Prudential and said, "How come you're not paying my claims?" Oh, yeah, I see here, there are a whole bunch of them. Oh, yeah, hundreds and hundreds of dollars. Geez, we've never paid. Why is it? Oh, she says, oh, I see. Yeah, we can't pay those claims. Why? Well, because they're denominated in a foreign currency. Yeah, well, I live in Japan, they charge me. Pretty good excuse. But I mean, so people don't like their health insurance companies. And of course, as we all know, the health insurance companies work very, very hard not to cover somebody who might be sick. This is the so-called pre-existing condition. And they basically don't want to sell their product to anybody who might use it. And you can understand, that's understandable, because their main goal in life is to pay a profit to their investors, not to care for health care. Guess what? It's not like that in any other country. In every other country we went to, the insurance company has to cover everybody. Generally, the premium is a percentage of your income. It's not always, but it's a percentage of your pay. And they can't deny a claim. If a doctor or hospital submits a claim, they have to pay it. As I said, in France, they have to pay within 2 weeks. I went to this health insurance company in Switzerland, and he's not making a profit. He's very competitive, and I said, "How do you?" He was his company was Allianz, and he was competing against Grand Mal, the biggest insurance. He was like the Avis. He was the number 2 of health insurance in Switzerland. And I said, "Well, look, do you want to be hurt? So you're going to be number 1?" He says, "Yeah, damn it, I'm going to pass that. I'm going to be number 1." "Well, how are you going to do it?" And he said, "Well, I'm just going to provide better service." "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, Grand Mal, they promised to pay every claim within 5 days. So now Allianz promises to pay every claim within 3 days." Now there is an insurance plan. Anybody ever get? No, I don't even have to ask. So here's my question: how do you get health insurance plans that are there to serve people and aren't cruel? And every other country in the world has hit on the same answer, and that is they have to be nonprofit. All the healthcare economists agree on this. The notion of making a profit when selling basic health insurance doesn't go together, because if your real goal is to pay a dividend to your investor, well, of course, you don't want to cover anybody who might get sick. And it's worthwhile to employ armies of adjusters to turn down claims. But in the other countries, they have to cover you, and they have to pay every claim. Now, the corollary for the benefit of the insurance company is that everybody has to buy insurance. And that's just a given, because if you don't do that, then the insurers will only get sick people, and they'll never be able to run an insurance pool. This is known as the individual mandate. Everybody's mandated to buy insurance. If you remember, Barack Obama and Hillary argued over this during the Democratic primaries. But in the rest of the world, there's no argument. Everybody has the individual mandate. You got to buy insurance, and in return for that, the insurance companies have to cover you and have to pay every claim, and they can't make a profit on the business. That's just a fundamental difference. And let's see. So here's what I've told you, that these insurance systems, many of them are just as private or more private than the American system. Many of them have less weighting and broader choice than the American system. And all of them are cheaper. The United States spends more per capita and more as a percentage of GDP on healthcare than anybody else, even though we don't cover everybody. And they all have, the ones that have health insurance companies have pretty friendly, nice insurance companies. People like their insurance company in other countries. So here's the question: how do you get there? How do you design a system that covers everybody for lower costs and does it in a fairly friendly way? And the answer to that is, well, the hard answer is, well, every country does it a little differently. I mentioned Britain. In Britain, the basic rule is you never pay a doctor bill. Medical care in Britain is like the public library or the fire department. It's there. It's a service. You pay for it through taxes, but you don't pay when you use it. That's their fundamental rule. 97% of the people in Britain go their whole life and never pay a doctor bill or a hospital. Just across the channel, 25 miles away, the French feel that you should always pay for medical care. It's usually only 10 euros, it's 14 bucks, whether you go to the doctor for a hangnail or have a quadruple bypass, but there's always a copay in France. And for many people, the insurance plan then sends it back to you in 2 weeks. But they feel you should always pay because they want you to know that you've gotten a valuable service, I think is the reason. So there are a lot of different ways to organize this, and you could go to every country. Fortunately for my publisher, you don't have to go to 190 different countries to figure out how to work healthcare. I would have liked it, frankly. I like travel, but no, as it turns out, there are certain models, there are certain standard systems that these companies fall into, and different healthcare economists come up with different taxonomies. But I see 4 different models, which I'm going to tell you what I think there are 4 basic models in the world. One is what's called the Beveridge model. This is named for Lord William Beveridge. He was this kind of bleeding heart, lefty British intellectual, and in 1946 he designed, as Britain came out of World War II and was looking to reorganize British life, he designed the National Health Service. The idea that all healthcare should always be free at the point of service. That healthcare is just a public service. And in that system, as I said, the government owns the hospitals, the government employs not all, but many of the doctors, and the government pays all the bills. I love the system. When our family lived in Britain, the doc comes to your house, gives your kid a shot, and walks out the door. No bill, no fight with the insurance company, no nothing. I loved it, it was great. That's the Beveridge model. It's used in Britain, of course, in Spain and Italy, New Zealand, Hong Kong, and Cuba. Cuba's the classic case of government-run healthcare. Next is the Bismarck model. This is named for Otto von Bismarck. He was the first chancellor of Germany. He had been the chancellor of Prussia, and the Prussians unified about 20 different fiefdoms and municipalities into the nation of Germany in 1872. And most of those people hated Prussia, had nothing to do with them. They all spoke German, but other than that, no ties. And so Bismarck's job as the chancellor, the first chancellor of this new country, was to convince the Frankfurters and the Bavarians and the Alsatians that they were really Germans and that they owed allegiance to this German government in Berlin. And the way he did it was, you wouldn't think of, I don't know if you've ever seen any picture of Otto von Bismarck, but he always has this spiked helmet on and this big Prussian sword. You wouldn't think of him as a warm and fuzzy kind of guy, but actually he invented the welfare state. What he did was he created a whole bunch of government goodies for people generating from Berlin that people could benefit from and feel a connection to this new country. So he created workman's compensation. If you got hurt, the government in Berlin paid for your repair. He created pensions. When you retire, you started getting money from Berlin for every month for the rest of your life. That made people feel pretty good. And Bismarck invented the first national healthcare system. He said that every German should have access to a doctor when he's sick. That's a pretty revolutionary notion at the time. And the way he did it was he created the system. He didn't want the government to run it, so he created a system where you bought health insurance through your employer, and the employer and the employee split the premium. Pretty familiar for most people in the United States. That's called the Bismarck model. You get health insurance from a private company through your employer, and you split the cost. Employer-employee split the cost. And that one is used in Germany, France, Netherlands, Switzerland, and Japan, among others. It's a very common model, and for about 160 million Americans are on the Bismarck model. The next model is kind of a mix of the two. I call this the national health insurance model. This is private providers, public insurance, public payment, and that's Canada. You go to a private doctor, private hospital, but a government-run health insurance system pays your bill. The Canadians call this Medicare. And when Lyndon Johnson created our system for the elderly in 1965, he borrowed the model and he borrowed the name, Medicare. We got it from Canada. That's used in, let's see, Canada, Taiwan, South Korea, etc. And then the fourth model is the most common model because it turns out only about 40 countries, the 40 richest countries in the world, have any healthcare system at all. In the rest of the world, the basic rule is if you have money and can pay the doctor, you get treated, and if you're poor, you stay sick or die. Your shoulder hurts for life, basically, in those countries. And that's generally known to the economists as the out-of-pocket model because you pay for medical care out of pocket. And if you have the money to pay when your kid has an earache, you take her to the doctor. And if you don't have any money at the time, well, either you send her to bed with the earache or you pay in potatoes. You pay with whatever you've got. The people weave rugs for the doctor. People provide, child care services for the doctor. People, serve as wet nurses for the doctor's kids. Whatever they've got to offer. When I was in Nepal, I went to this clinic. It was a tiny little stucco building up on this hillside in Nepal, and hiked up to it. And it's just the plainest, drabbest stucco rectangular building you've ever seen, but really brightly colored. In fact, every wall was a different color. And I went in to see the doctor, and I said, "Hey, Doc, I noticed your building outside, every wall is a different color." And he said, "Yeah, most of the people who come in here don't have any money to pay me, but they all have a little paint at home, so they say, I'll paint your building." And they all have a different color paint. That's the out-of-pocket model. And that's the most common model in the world. So did you hear the four? The Beveridge model, the Bismarck model, the national health insurance model, and the out-of-pocket model. All the economists generally agree on the design. They don't all agree on the name. I tended to name them for the guy who invented them. Now, here's the striking thing. These are foreign healthcare systems. They're four models of foreign healthcare, right? Except they're not foreign at all. They're not foreign at all because we have all of them. The United States has them all. If you happen to be a veteran or a member of the US military, you're living in Britain. They're working in the national health system because the VA system owns the hospitals, employs the doctors, assigns a doctor to you, you don't get to choose, and you never get a bill. That's even more regulated than the NHS. In Britain, you can choose your doctor, but the same thing otherwise. Veterans are in the Beveridge model. Incidentally, may I just point out that during the Republican primaries, Rudy Giuliani said, the last thing we need in this country is that British-style government-run medicine. It's un-American. It's socialist. So if it's un-American, why do we provide it for America's military heroes? That's the question. If you're over 65 and on Medicare, you're living in Canada. That's the Canadian National Health Insurance model. If you're getting health insurance through your employer and splitting the premium with the employer, then you're living in Germany. That's the Bismarck model. And as I said, 160 million Americans are in that model now. And if you're one of the tens of millions of Americans who have no coverage, well, you're living in Malawi or Madagascar or Colombia. You're living in the out-of-pocket system. If you can come up with the money to pay the doctor, you're fine. Maybe some charity will help you, although often it doesn't. And that's why 20,000 Americans die every year because they can't afford to see a doctor. We have all the models. Here's the difference. The fundamental difference is all the other countries in the world, all the other developed rich countries like us, have settled on one model for everybody. Everybody's in an NHS or everybody's Bismarck. They don't have these various models. Some countries, it's true, some countries have a military medical care system, so when the soldier's overseas and gets dysentery or gets shot, there are military doctors to care for you. But guess what? The minute that soldier goes home, she's in the NHS. She's in the same system with everybody else. Everybody's in the same model. And I asked every health minister in the world, in all these rich countries, why do you do that? Because, John McCain complained about this. He said, well, that's one-size-fits-all medicine. It's just too strict. There's no leverage there. There's no room for individuality. So why do you do that? And there are two answers. One is, it's vastly cheaper. It's vastly simpler. if there's one paying system or one system of payment rules and one system of forms and one agreed set of approved procedures and medications, it doesn't have to be single payer. Japan has 3,500 different payers, different insurance plans. But they all operate on one set of rules that applies to everybody in the country, and the money they save on that, as compared to our 25% and the hundreds and hundreds of different forms that an American hospital has to keep. I'm on the board of the CU Medical School, and just recently we have this new campus out at, it's called the Anschutz campus. Please don't call it Fitzsimmons. Phil Anschutz gave us $96 million, and it's the Anschutz campus. Anyway, on the Anschutz campus, we just built a new building, a 6-story building. We went out and had a big ceremony to cut the ribbon and everything. You know what the 6-story building is for? It's the billing office. It's the billing office for University Hospital and the docs. No other country has that kind of problem because they've all settled on one. And then the other reason that they have one system for everybody, and all the health ministers agree on this, is they think it's fairer. They think it's fairer if everybody in the country has access to the same care at the same price. That seems fairer to them. Now, right then, with that sentence, this speech has taken a dramatic turn. Because up to then, I've really been trying to talk to you as a reporter, just an objective observer. I'm telling you what I saw around the world. And reporters get things wrong, but I've worked very hard on this project, and I think basically the models and the lessons I've been telling you are basically right. But when you get to the word fair, that's not the realm of objective reporting anymore. When you're talking about whether a healthcare system is fair or just or equitable or decent or ethical, well, now these are subjective questions. These are not objective questions that a reporter can report to you. And here's the really striking thing, the most important thing I learned going around the world to all these countries. This is the key point of my book. And I didn't realize it either. I wrote this whole book. I sent it in to the editor, and she's a very, very good editor. And she called me and said, the most important point of your book, you don't get to the 11th chapter. So let's put it up front. It's the moral question. And the moral question is, as a society, do you feel that everybody in your country should have access to a doctor when she needs it? That's the question. And I'll tell you, this French doctor, Valérie Noumont, a French doctor, attractive, incredibly stylish woman, was talking to me in Paris, and she said, "Oh, you Americans, you say this, we're all created equal, but of course this is nonsense. We're not all created equal." She says, "Some people are very attractive, and some no, and some people are just born with a certain intelligence, and some don't have it." And then she's kind of looking at me, and she says, "Some people have a sense of fashion, and others..." But then she said, "In France, we believe that once you get sick, everyone is equal. Once you get sick, everybody has equal access to the same care. Rich or poor, it doesn't matter." And if that's your fundamental moral judgment about this concept of healthcare, well, then you design a system like Britain or France or Germany or Japan where everybody is covered and everybody who's sick has access to a doctor, whether they've got money or not. And if you don't arrive at that moral conclusion, if you see healthcare as a commodity, like hockey sticks, well, then maybe you come up with a system where rich people or people with good insurance get the finest care in the world in the finest facilities with no waiting, and tens of millions of others are just left out on the street with nothing. If you don't decide that everybody who needs health care should get it, then maybe you end up in a rich country where 20,000 of your fellow citizens die every year because they can't afford to see a doctor. And that's where we are. So here's the question, why? Why is America the only developed country that hasn't made this decision? Well, I thought about this a great deal. It's not, I don't think it's because we're cruel or callous or we're so tied up on our own 401k plans that we don't care about the guy down the street. No, I don't think that's it at all. I think we've never had this conversation in America. We've never sat down and said, what are our ethical views about providing health care for everybody? As you know, I'm sure you know this, the American healthcare system just kind of developed. Nobody would have designed it, and nobody did design it. Our Bismarck system of health insurance through the employer developed after in World War II and kind of spread. In the 1970s, until the 1970s, health insurance in America, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, was nonprofit. And then in the 1970s and 80s, for-profit companies like Aetna and United Health and WellPoint started buying these nonprofit companies and turning them into for-profit health insurance, which nobody ever planned out. It just happened. In 1965, Lyndon Johnson said, well, we ought to provide some kind of government-run paid health care for all the seniors. And do you remember this argument? In the AMA, the medical association, fought this vigorously. They didn't like socialized medicine. And their argument was, well, gee, why are you providing all these rich seniors with health care when there are a lot of poor people who can't even see the doctor? And, you know, Lyndon Johnson, he called their bluff. He said, okay, I'll start Medicaid too, you know, for poor people. And it's, as you know, it's two different systems. And in America, the same doctor for the same procedure is paid less to treat a poor person than he is to treat an elderly person. Medicaid pays less than Medicare. Who would have designed that? Who thought of that one? We just never designed it. We've never had this conversation. My argument is we should. We really ought to sit back and decide for ourselves whether we think we want to be a society that sees a moral obligation to provide health care for everybody, like all the other rich countries have done. And my contention is, if we decide we want to do it, if we make that commitment, well, there are a lot of models out there that we can copy from countries just like us to make it happen. And we'll probably save money in the process. They all spend less than we do. Now, I'm getting back to objective journalism here. This sounds like a political statement, but this is an objective statement. We don't have the best healthcare system in the world. In fact, even most American politicians don't dare say anymore we have the best healthcare system in the world. They get hooted out of the room. Even George W., our economy is fundamentally sound, Bush hasn't said we have the best healthcare system in the world since 2002. I mean, nobody, we just don't. The World Health Organization did a ranking of healthcare systems around the world, 191 countries, and they rated us 37th in the world. They rated on quality and fairness. Well, we're pretty good on quality, not the best, but pretty good. But we're rotten on fairness because we let people die in our country because they can't see a doctor, so we came in 37. I don't know if that ranking is the right number, but we're not number one. We're probably not in the top 10 in terms of health care for our people, even though we're the richest, most powerful country in history. But you know what? We should have the best health care system in the world. And we could have the best healthcare system in the world if you look at our assets, what we've got going for us. We have the best trained doctors, the best trained nurses, the best trained pharmacists, the best medical education system on earth. We have the most advanced and most ambitious medical research. We have the finest state-of-the-art facilities of any country, anywhere. And of course, we've proven we're willing to pay more for healthcare than anybody else is. With all that going for us, we ought to be number one. And we haven't gotten there because we have this hodgepodge of a crazy quilt system that doesn't work. And we don't have to. We can look at these other countries, we can look at these other models and learn something. So my argument to you is, if we commit to provide health care to everybody, if we resolve that moral question, then there are a lot of models out there so that we could then say, yes, America has the best health care in the world.
In a Bismarck system, if you don't have a job, I'm right here in front of you.
Yeah.
Okay. If you don't have a job, then who pays?
Yeah, I should have said that. In the Bismarck model, you get health insurance through your employer. If you don't have a job, the government plays the role of the employer. Either in some countries it's your local municipal government, in some countries it's the federal government. Either, if you have enough money to pay your half of the premium, then the government pays the employer's half, or if you're too poor for that, the government pays the whole thing. But the crucial point is, when you lose your job, you keep your health insurance. They keep you in the same system, and that's the fundamental. I mean, of all the cruelties in American healthcare, to me, the cruelest one is that when you lose your job, you also lose your health insurance when you need it most.
Here, question. You mentioned one of the real keys is for the insurance companies to be nonprofits. Now, being nonprofit, what is their incentive to exist?
That's a great question. Actually, health insurance in America was nonprofit for its first 40 years. There were two incentives for Blue Cross and Blue Shield to start, and it gradually spread to every state. One is it's a source of income for docs and hospitals. It means that they get paid. But the main reason is it's there to pay people's medical bills and keep a population healthy. In other words, it's a charity operation. And there are still nonprofit health insurance operations scattered here and there around the United States. Kaiser Permanente is one of them. And I think if you ask docs at Kaiser, why do you do this, or the head of Kaiser, they say, well, we have an interest in keeping the population healthy. And that's a pretty driving interest. And you think about the kind of people who go to medical school, they're talented, smart people. They put 4, 8, 12 years into this. They largely did it to help people. That's why they did it. And, so I think there is an incentive. In Germany, these companies, although they're nonprofit, I told you they're 240, they compete like crazy. They compete on services, they very cleverly pick out different branches of the population, like there are 5 or 6 insurance companies in Germany that compete for newlywed women between the ages of 20 and 35. And what they do is they offer all sorts of prenatal care and postnatal instruction, and a free postnatal nurse comes to your house if you buy their insurance. That's how they compete. There are other guys who compete for people over 65. And offer the kind of things, knee replacement or whatever, canes or whatever people that age need. I'm there. I'm definitely there. They compete like mad. Why? Well, because if you get more insureds, then the executive's pay goes up a little bit. So that's one reason, but mainly because, the same reason the Ford Foundation wants to be bigger than the Gates Foundation, that people just compete. But they're not driven by profit, and yet they still compete.
Out of all the health insurance systems you saw, which one was your favorite?
My personal favorite, as a husband and a father and a patient myself, was Britain. I just love this system. It was good care. We never had to wait very long. Nobody ever had polio or cancer, but we had broken legs, we had measles, and we got good care right down the street, or the guy came to our house quite often, and you never get a bill. And therefore, you never have that long fight with the insurance company over who's going to pay the bill. As I said, I argued with my GP about some of the stuff they wouldn't cover. But you can argue with your insurance company here too. So I really like that system, and of course you pay for it. It's not free. You don't ever pay a doctor bill. But the sales tax in Britain is 17.5% on everything you buy, including food. So you definitely pay in taxes. They pay high taxes in that country. They've all decided, the Brits have all decided that they like that better. They'd rather do that than pay for medical care. I think that may be too much government for America. Everybody in the country covered by the VA, that may be too much government. Certainly would be for Rudy Giuliani. So if we want to stick with a private system, I thought the Japanese system was phenomenal. Private docs, private hospitals, private insurance, they have the longest life expectancy in the world, the healthiest population in the world. There's this statistic that public health people use. healthy life expectancy at age 60. And the question there is, when you turn 60, how long can you expect to live before you get aging onset standard chronic diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or Alzheimer's and stuff like that? The Japanese have the longest. A Japanese woman who turns 60 will be 78 before she starts to get the diseases of aging. Incredibly fabulous statistics. And get this, the Japanese love going to the doctor. They go to the doctor 3 times as much, 15 times a year on average. We go 4.8. Average hospital stay in America is 6 nights. In Japan, 36 nights. When you have a baby in Japan, mother and child stay in the hospital for 10 days. And get this, and they spend half as much per capita as we do on healthcare. And I know how they do it. It's in my book, but I'll tell you here. They shaft the doctors and hospitals. They have this incredibly stingy payment scale that applies to everybody in the country. But it works. It's good care, very, very good return on the dollar, and excellent results. So if I were going to copy a healthcare system, that's the one I'd copy because it's all private.
Well, is a major reason for our high cost of medical care our dependence on emergency services? I work as a volunteer on emergency.
Microphone.
Underneath.
Hello.
I work as a volunteer
Mike's on.
I can hear it. I'll tell you.
on an emergency ward, and I was surprised at how few real emergencies there were. People went there for colds, for scrapes,
Yeah.
did not have a regular doctor.
Yeah. So here the question is one of the reasons we spend so much more than everybody else because Americans rely on the emergency room more than everybody else, and that's the most expensive possible way to treat a scraped knee or an earache or a hangnail or something, if people have to go into the emergency room because they don't have a doctor. And some people think it's going to be free. It's generally not free to go to the emergency room, contrary to what President Bush said, it's not free. And yeah, that's a very, very, very expensive way to deliver standard health care, and most other countries don't do it that way because when you get sick, you can go to the doctor and you don't have to worry about whether you can pay or not. So people do go. They go earlier than when they do in America because people are afraid to go and face the doctor bill until they're really sick. That's definitely true, but it's not the major cost element of ours. I think the cost elements that add to America's costs are one is this crazy quilt nature and therefore the enormous administrative cost that falls on doctors, hospitals, labs, nurses, pharmacists. There are just so many different people to bill and so many different schemes and so many different rules that are constantly changing. It's expensive and time-consuming for everybody. And then another big factor, all the economists agree, is this business of for-profit insurance. It just adds exponentially to the administrative costs of paying for healthcare if you have to make a profit, because then they have to ferret out the people they want to insure and they don't insure. They have to go through claims and turn them down, and then somebody appeals. I don't know if you know this, but the doctors here will know this. There's this industry in America called the denial management industry. And these are companies, their whole point of existence is after the insurance company has turned down the claim and the doctor hasn't gotten paid, he then goes to the denial management company. It's kind of a collections agency, and they know how to collect from the insurance companies because they have experts who've learned all the rules. But then they take 30%. So everybody raises their fee. You see what I'm getting at? So the crazy quilt nature, for-profit payment, those things grossly add to the cost. The reliance on emergency rooms for people who could have gotten treated much cheaper if they had access to a doctor, that also adds to the cost. You know what doesn't add much to the cost is the malpractice system. It adds a little bit, but the studies show about 1%, Our costs are 20 to 25% higher than other countries, sometimes 40%, and it adds 1%. So that's not a big factor, but the others are.
Back there?
Mr. Reid,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
yeah.
I think you just answered my first question about malpractice insurance. I would have figured that would have been a little more contributor to the cost of American healthcare. Did you say that's about 1%?
Yeah, malpractice, look, every country has to come up with a system to recompense patients who are hurt. Patients are hurt by doctors and hospitals everywhere. It's not just here, believe me. You have to come up with a system to recompense them, care for them, and you have to come up with a way to punish, you know, to police the doctors who are causing these problems. They all have methods to do it, but no other country uses the malpractice system, uses the tort system. They just don't do it. Our system, it forces doctors to pay these very, very high premiums. I'm sure it forces doctors to order more tests and take defensive measures that really aren't worth the money, but they're afraid of getting sued. It has problems. It would be smart for us to reduce that burden on doctors, but it wouldn't save a ton of money.
How would you said that the Canadian system was comparable to Medicare in this country.
Mm-hmm.
In both cases, we've got private physicians and hospitals, but
Yeah.
you also mentioned there's a waiting line for services there, and I think most of our experiences here under Medicare is that's not the case. Why do they have this waiting requirement and we don't under Medicare?
Yeah, so why the Canadian, since Medicare in the US is the same as the Canadian system, private providers, public payers, why do they have these long waiting lines and we don't? And the answer is they're saving money that way. The answer is we spend about 16 or 17% of GDP on healthcare, and they spend 7.8%. So if they were to staff up and get enough doctors and emergency rooms, they'd probably, not emergency rooms, but operating rooms, they'd probably go up to 8 or 9% of GDP, 10% of GDP on healthcare, and they don't want to spend that money. That's why. But I don't think any country would ever get to 16% like we're at, and particularly not a country that doesn't cover everybody. But they're saving money. That's their method of saving money, is to queue. Also, the Canadians made this incredibly stupid mistake. I still haven't figured out why they did this, but they had a study in the 1990s, in the mid-90s, looking at the supply of doctors, and they concluded that there were enough doctors in Canada. And medical schools in Canada actually reduced the number of students by about 20% in the 1990s. Now they have an acute shortage. They're bringing in doctors from Albania, and Poland to treat people in Canada. It was just a policy mistake of the worst order, but they also did it on purpose to save money.
Over here.
Can you give us some information about how pharmaceuticals and patient equipment is handled in this country?
Yeah, drugs and medical devices. In all these countries, even if there are many payers, as I say, there's one system. And that system either buys all the drugs or sets the price for the drugs. In other words, there's only one buyer for the drug companies to deal with, and therefore that buyer has enormous economic clout. And therefore they keep the prices down, and as a matter of fact, I have this in my new book. My book is coming out in June. It'll make great Father's Day giving. I talk about the comparative prices of certain standard drugs. A pill, the same pill made in the same factory, costs 88 cents a pill in America and 20 cents a pill in Britain. Same pill, same company. And the reason is there's only one buyer in Britain, and they said, we're going to pay you 20 cents. And there's no market. And this is absolutely true. You and I, Americans, are subsidizing all the other sick people in the world by paying more for drugs, so that the drug companies then charge less in rich countries like Germany, Japan, Liechtenstein, with the per capita income about 20% higher than ours. They pay less for pills than we do. I think this is crazy. I don't want to subsidize rich Japanese people by giving them cheaper pills because I pay more. It just doesn't seem right. The reason for this, in my view, there are many arguments about this, is the political clout of the drug companies. They don't want a single buyer in America, and therefore, when Congress passed Medicare Part D, saying Medicare is now going to be the biggest buyer of drugs in America, the drug companies put into that bill a clause that says you have to pay what the drug companies charge. Medicare can't negotiate for a lower fee. President-elect Obama has been saying he's going to change that, and that should reduce our costs. And of course, the drug companies don't like that. But same for devices. Medical devices are purchased by under a single plan. They may not buy one purchaser, a single price plan, and they're stuck. In our, I don't know how many people saw our film, but in our film Sick Around the World that was on PBS, this doctor we visited in Japan, he invested in an MRI scanner for his clinic, and he's looking up the price for me, and I said, you know, I had an MRI on my neck in Denver. It's right on Broadway and 10th Avenue in Denver a couple of months ago, and it cost $1,234. What do you charge? And he looks through the pricing book that the government has issued him, $98. $98 for the same procedure. And I said to the health minister, I don't understand that. Why would a doc do a $1,200 job for $100? And he said, well, he's got nowhere else to sell it. What choice does he have? And you know what happened there? Because the doctors can't charge a lot for MRIs, they went to the MRI makers, and Hitachi and Toshiba are two of the biggest MRI makers in the world, and said, we need cheaper machines. And they came in with a machine that's about a fifth the price of the GE, the basic entry-level GE scan machine, so that the doctors can buy this machine and still make money at $98 a scan. Are you following me? And now Toshiba and Hitachi export those cheap machines all over the world to poorer countries. And this is all because of this intense price pressure from the top. So I'm arguing that intense price pressure from the top is a good thing. And when I say that to the medical societies, they boo me. You know, they don't like that, but I think it's true.
Last question.
Okay.
Final question. I think it's up there.
Hi, I'm a medical publisher and been involved in the medical field for about 15 years. And I agree with a lot of the statements that you're saying. And I see with Obama coming in, some of the dramatic things that he's going to do is going to be incredibly influential for our profit line here for healthcare here in the United States. One of the biggest things that wasn't addressed tonight is advertising to consumers over the TV. It's a waste of dollars. My 87-year-old mom goes in and she says, I have an anxiety disorder, I want Paxil. And if her physician doesn't supply it, she's going to change because she doesn't feel like this is representative of her particular needs. Again, healthcare. Obama is going to rein in.
What's the question?
Pharmaceuticals from overseas. We're paying way too much for the pharmaceuticals that here in the United States we're getting substantial just comment on that.
Yeah, so she's talking about this, among other things, talking about this direct-to-consumer advertising, you know, where they advertise the drug on TV. I love these, and we watch the network news, you know, and without drug companies, those programs would be dead, I think. And don't you love this, where the guy says, man, this is going to cure all your ills, you're going to be a happy person, and by the way, it can cause death, disease, paralysis, 4-hour erection. I just love that. And a guy at a pharmaceutical company at the Industry Association told me that if they don't mention the name of the drug, they don't have to tell you that it could kill you, you know? And that's why they now advertise the purple pill, you know, or ask your doctor about the new, you know, and doesn't tell you the name, because then they don't have to say blah, 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 like that. Yeah, no other country. New Zealand, for a while, allowed direct-to-consumer advertising. It just greatly increases marketing expenses. And the interesting question, the drug companies say, well, if we cut their payment, if we pay them less for the drugs, they'll have less money for R&D. And this is worrisome to me. But maybe if we cut our prices, they charge more in Britain and Japan and Germany. But also, the fact is, they spend 10 to 12% of their income on R&D and 25% on marketing. So maybe they would cut that. So anyway, I'm really grateful to you for coming and for listening.